We went to South America. There was 75,000 people in this football stadium and they sang along to...
Geezer Butler just did something that has never happened in 53 years of heavy metal history. The man who invented the dark, philosophical backbone of Black Sabbath, who spent over half a century avoiding every single controversy and staying diplomatically silent while the metal world burned around him, just released a statement about Roger Waters that's so absolutely savage. It makes Waters' attack on Ozzy look like a gentle suggestion. And this wasn't some emotional outburst from a grieving bandmate. This was a calculated, methodical destruction from the smartest man in heavy metal, someone who's been watching Roger Waters' behavior for decades and finally decided that silence was no longer an option. Because when Geezer Butler finally chooses to destroy someone, he doesn't just throw punches. He performs surgical strikes that expose everything wrong with their character. Here's what Butler said, and I'm reading this directly from his official statement. Roger Waters has spent his entire career pretending to be a champion of artistic integrity while systematically undermining other artists behind the scenes. His attack on Ozzy's legacy is just the latest example of behavior I've witnessed for almost 50 years. I've stayed quiet because I believed in taking the high road, but watching Roger kick a dead man while his family mourns has shown me that sometimes silence just enables toxic people to keep being toxic. Now, if you know anything about Geezer Butler, you know this statement is absolutely unprecedented. This is the man who stayed diplomatic when Tony Iommi and Ozzy had their most vicious public fights. He kept quiet when record labels tried to destroy Black Sabbath's creative control. He's been nothing but gracious to everyone from Metallica to Slipknot, even when they've completely overshadowed Sabbath's influence without proper credit. Butler has built his entire reputation on being the intellectual, the peacemaker, the Sabbath member who never burns bridges and always thinks before he speaks. So for him to come out swinging at Roger Waters like this isn't just surprising. It's a complete character revelation that suggests something much deeper and more personal than anyone realized. But Butler didn't stop with general accusations. He made this personal in a way that shocked everyone who knows him. Roger Waters represents everything that's poisonous about ego-driven artistry. He builds walls between himself and genuine human connection, then attacks other people for having the authentic relationships he's incapable of forming. Ozzy Osbourne spent his life tearing down barriers between performers and audiences, creating genuine connections that Roger could never understand because he's too busy protecting his own image to actually connect with anyone. The heavy metal community's reaction was immediate and intense. Within hours, Butler's statement was trending globally, with major metal artists either rallying to support him or completely stunned that the quiet Sabbath bassist had finally broken his golden rule about public conflicts. But what really sent shockwaves through the industry was the realization that if Geezer Butler felt strongly enough to break decades of diplomatic silence, then Roger Waters must have crossed a line that goes far beyond his comments about Ozzy. Here's the part that's got industry insiders completely baffled. Butler's statement wasn't reactive emotional grief. This wasn't Geezer getting upset about Waters attacking his dead bandmate and firing off an angry response. The language was too precise, too calculated, too perfectly crafted to systematically destroy Waters' reputation as someone who cares about artistic integrity. This was strategic warfare from someone who's been thinking about this moment for a very long time. The most telling detail is how Butler positioned his attack. He didn't just defend Ozzy's legacy, he used Waters' behavior toward Ozzy as evidence of a much larger pattern of toxic behavior that Butler has apparently been documenting for decades. This wasn't about defending a friend. This was about finally exposing someone whose character Butler has been questioning privately for almost 50 years. Because here's what nobody's talking about yet. Geezer Butler and Roger Waters have serious history. Complicated, decades-old history that's been carefully hidden from public view. And Butler's decision to finally break his silence suggests that Waters' attack on Ozzy was just the final straw in a conflict that goes back to the early days of both Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath. The timing of Butler's statement is also significant. He waited until Waters had already shown his worst side to the world, until public opinion was already turning against Waters, until the perfect moment to deliver a killing blow that would do maximum damage to Waters' credibility. This wasn't about defending Ozzy's memory. This was about settling a score that apparently goes back to the founding days of progressive rock and heavy metal. Industry sources are quietly suggesting that Butler's explosive statement was just the opening move in something much bigger. Because Geezer Butler doesn't break 50 years of diplomatic silence just to make a point about Roger Waters' character. He breaks silence when he has evidence, documentation, and a plan to completely destroy someone who's been getting away with toxic behavior for far too long. The heavy metal world is holding its breath, waiting to see what Butler reveals next. Because if his opening statement was this devastating, what he's been keeping secret for decades might completely rewrite how we understand the relationship between progressive rock and heavy metal. This is just the beginning of Geezer Butler's war against Roger Waters, and based on his opening move, Waters has no idea what's about to hit him. The secret that Geezer Butler has been guarding for 48 years finally explains why his hatred of Roger Waters runs so deep, and it's not about musical differences or artistic rivalry. This is about the most devastating betrayal in rock history, a betrayal so calculated and so destructive that it changed the entire trajectory of heavy metal's relationship with the music industry forever. It all started in the summer of 1975, when the early heavy metal scene was facing an existential crisis. Record labels were trying to control and commercialize the raw power of bands like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Deep Purple, forcing them into pop formulas that would destroy everything revolutionary about their sound. The labels had figured out that metal could be profitable, but only if they could tame it, package it, and turn these dangerous artists into controllable commercial products. That's when Geezer Butler came up with an idea that should have changed music history. He secretly reached out to the leadership of every major heavy rock band in Britain and proposed something that had never been attempted before: a unified resistance movement against record label exploitation. Not a public rebellion that the labels could crush, but a sophisticated underground alliance that would give heavy music artists unprecedented control over their creative and financial destinies. Butler's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. If all the major heavy rock acts coordinated their contract negotiations, shared information about label tactics, and presented a united front, they could force the industry to treat them as serious artists rather than disposable commodities. The labels couldn't afford to lose every major heavy rock act simultaneously, which meant the artists would finally have real negotiating power for the first time in rock history. The response to Butler's secret proposal was immediate and enthusiastic. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin were instantly on board, seeing this as their chance to gain control over their publishing rights. Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple committed immediately, bringing John Lord and Ian Pace with him. Even smaller bands like Uriah Heep and Wishbone Ash pledged their support, understanding that this alliance could elevate the entire heavy rock scene to a new level of industry respect. But Butler knew that for this alliance to work, they needed credibility with the progressive rock establishment. Heavy metal was still seen as primitive and unsophisticated compared to the artistic achievements of bands like Pink Floyd, Yes, and King Crimson. If the Metal Alliance could get endorsement from respected progressive rock leaders, the record labels would have to take them seriously as legitimate artists rather than just loud troublemakers. That's when Butler made the mistake that haunts him to this day. He reached out to Roger Waters, seeing Pink Floyd as the perfect bridge between heavy metal's raw power and progressive rock's intellectual credibility. Waters had been publicly critical of record label manipulation, and Butler believed that Waters would naturally support an alliance designed to protect artistic integrity across all genres of rock music. Waters' response was everything Butler had hoped for. He enthusiastically endorsed the alliance, offered to host secret planning meetings at Pink Floyd's facilities, and even suggested bringing in other progressive rock leaders like Peter Gabriel and Robert Fripp. For 3 months during late 1975, Waters was the most active participant in alliance planning sessions, contributing strategic ideas and offering to use Pink Floyd's industry connections to legitimize the movement. The alliance meetings were held in complete secrecy, rotating between different band facilities to avoid detection by record label executives. Waters attended every single meeting, taking detailed notes and asking sophisticated questions about contract negotiation strategies, publishing rights protection, and coordination tactics. He seemed genuinely committed to the cause, often staying late after meetings to discuss additional ways Pink Floyd could support the alliance's goals. But here's where Butler's story gets absolutely devastating. While Waters was publicly supporting the alliance and privately attending every planning meeting, He was simultaneously feeding every detail about the alliance's strategies directly to the record label executives they were trying to outmaneuver. Not just general information, but specific negotiation tactics, planned coordination timing, and detailed intelligence about which bands were most committed to the resistance movement. The betrayal was systematic and comprehensive. Waters had convinced Butler and the other alliance leaders to share their most sensitive strategic information, promising that Pink Floyd's industry connections would help them implement their plans more effectively. Then Waters turned around and gave that information to the exact label executives who were trying to crush the alliance before it could gain momentum. What made this betrayal especially cruel was how Waters used the alliance meetings to identify the most vulnerable bands in the movement. He'd ask detailed questions about each band's financial situation, contract deadlines, and internal disagreements, claiming he wanted to help Pink Floyd provide targeted support. Then he'd use that information to help label executives apply pressure at exactly the right moments to fracture the alliance from within. The alliance collapsed in early 1976, just months before it was supposed to launch its first coordinated contract negotiation campaign. One by one, alliance bands started getting unexpected offers from their labels, deals that were perfectly timed to exploit their individual vulnerabilities and prevent them from participating in collective bargaining. The labels knew exactly how much pressure to apply and when to apply it, because Waters had given them a detailed roadmap to destroying the alliance. Butler knew immediately that they'd been betrayed, but it took him months to figure out that Waters was the source of the leak. By then, the damage was irreversible. The alliance was destroyed. The participating bands were locked into individual contracts that prevented future coordination, and the opportunity to revolutionize heavy metal's relationship with the music industry was gone forever. The most devastating part of Waters' betrayal was how he used it to advance Pink Floyd's own interests. While the Metal Alliance was being systematically destroyed, Pink Floyd was signing unprecedented deals that gave them exactly the kind of creative and financial control that the Alliance had been trying to achieve for all heavy rock artists. Waters had essentially stolen the Alliance's strategies and used them exclusively for Pink Floyd's benefit, while ensuring that no other band could access the same advantages. For 48 years, Butler has watched Waters build a reputation as an artist who fights for creative integrity and artistic independence, knowing that Waters' entire career was built on betraying other artists who were fighting for those same principles. And now, watching Waters attack Ozzy's legacy, Butler finally understands that Waters' behavior toward a dead man's memory is exactly the same as his behavior toward the Alliance in 1975, taking something that doesn't belong to him and destroying it for his own benefit. 48 hours after Geezer Butler's initial bombshell statement, he did something that nobody in the music industry thought was possible. He didn't just make accusations about Roger Waters' betrayal of the Heavy Metal Alliance. He opened his personal archives and started releasing documented evidence so damaging, so meticulously preserved, that Waters' entire reputation as an artist of integrity is crumbling in real time. The first devastating piece of evidence Butler released was a collection of signed agreements from the 1975 Alliance meetings, documents that Waters personally signed promising to maintain absolute secrecy about Alliance strategies and to use Pink Floyd's industry connections solely to benefit the collective movement. These aren't just informal handshake deals or verbal promises. These are legally binding documents with Waters' signature, committing him to support the Alliance's goals and protect its confidential information. But Butler didn't stop there. He released the meeting minutes from every single Alliance session, documents that show Waters actively participating in strategic planning while simultaneously gathering intelligence to betray the movement. You can read Waters' own handwritten notes from these meetings, where he's asking detailed questions about each band's financial vulnerabilities and contract deadlines, information he would later use to help record labels destroy the Alliance. The most damaging evidence came in the form of audio recordings that Butler secretly made during the final Alliance meetings in late 1975. These recordings capture Waters making passionate speeches about artistic integrity and the importance of musicians standing together against corporate exploitation, all while he was actively feeding information to the same corporate executives he was publicly condemning. In one recording from December 1975, you can actually hear Waters saying, brothers, we're fighting for the soul of rock music itself. If we don't stand together now, the labels will turn us all into corporate puppets dancing to their commercial tune. I pledge Pink Floyd's complete loyalty to this alliance, and I swear on my artistic integrity that I will never betray what we're building here." That recording is dated just 3 weeks before Waters met secretly with EMI executives to provide them with detailed intelligence about the alliance's planned contract negotiation strategies. Butler then released something that sent shockwaves through the music journalism community: transcripts of private phone conversations between Waters and record label executives, conversations that Butler's team had apparently been monitoring since early 1976. These transcripts reveal Waters systematically providing confidential alliance information to the very people the alliance was trying to outmaneuver. In one conversation with an EMI executive in January 1976, Waters can be read saying, "The Sabbath bassist thinks he's orchestrating some kind of revolution, but he's given me access to every band's weaknesses. I can tell you exactly when to pressure each of them and how much leverage you'll need to break their resolve." The transcripts get even more damaging. Waters wasn't just betraying alliance strategies. He was actively helping label executives develop psychological tactics to manipulate individual band members. In one conversation, Waters provides detailed personality profiles of alliance leaders, suggesting specific approaches that would be most effective in breaking their commitment to collective bargaining. But Butler saved his most devastating evidence for last: financial records showing that Waters received substantial payments from multiple record labels during the exact period when he was sabotaging the alliance. These weren't standard royalty payments or legitimate consulting fees. These were direct compensation for intelligence gathering and alliance disruption activities. The financial documents reveal that Waters was essentially operating as a paid intelligence agent for the record industry while pretending to support the alliance's goals. He received payments from EMI, Polydor, and Atlantic Records for providing confidential information about alliance strategies, individual band vulnerabilities, and planned coordination activities. Butler's evidence dump included witness statements from former Pink Floyd roadies and sound engineers who observed Waters' meetings with record label executives during the alliance period. These testimonies, signed and notarized decades ago, but never released until now, detail exactly how Waters coordinated his intelligence activities while maintaining his cover as an alliance supporter. One sound engineer's statement describes watching Waters photocopy confidential alliance documents at Pink Floyd's studio, then personally delivering those copies to record label offices in London. Another roadie testifies about driving Waters to secret meetings with label executives, meetings that Waters claimed were about Pink Floyd business, but were actually intelligence briefings about alliance activities. The most shocking revelation came when Butler released correspondence between Waters and individual alliance bands, letters where Waters actively worked to undermine their confidence in the alliance while pretending to offer friendly advice. In letters to Led Zeppelin's management, Waters suggests that the alliance is doomed to fail and that Zeppelin should negotiate separately to protect their interests. He sent similar letters to Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, and other alliance members, each one perfectly crafted to exploit that band's specific concerns and weaken their commitment to collective action. Butler's evidence vault included internal Pink Floyd memos where Waters discussed his alliance infiltration activities with other band members. These documents reveal that Waters' betrayal wasn't a spontaneous decision or moment of weakness. This was a calculated, long-term strategy that Waters planned and executed with the full knowledge that he was destroying other artists' careers to benefit Pink Floyd. The cumulative effect of Butler's evidence release has been the complete destruction of Waters' credibility as an artist who fights for creative independence. Every speech Waters has ever given about artistic integrity, every criticism he's made of commercially motivated musicians, every lecture about maintaining creative independence, all of it is now exposed as hypocrisy from a man who built his career on betraying other artists' attempts to achieve those same goals. The music industry's response has been swift and brutal. Within 24 hours of Butler's evidence dump, major metal festivals started removing Waters from their historical tribute sections. Classic rock radio stations began questioning whether to continue playing Pink Floyd material in their Artists of Integrity programming blocks. Music journalists who had spent decades praising Waters' principled stance against commercialism were scrambling to write corrections and retractions. But the most devastating industry response came from the surviving members of the bands Waters betrayed. Robert Plant issued a statement saying, "Geezer's evidence confirms what we suspected but could never prove. Roger Waters destroyed something beautiful that could have changed rock history forever." Ritchie Blackmore added, "Waters didn't just betray us individually. He betrayed the entire spirit of what rock music was supposed to represent." Butler's methodical destruction of Waters' reputation isn't just about settling an old score anymore. He's systematically proven that everything Waters claims to stand for is a lie, and the evidence is so overwhelming that no one can defend Waters' character anymore. This isn't about musical differences or artistic rivalry. This is about exposing a fraud who has been deceiving the music world for 48 years. Geezer Butler's systematic destruction of Roger Waters hasn't just exposed one man's decades of deception. It's triggered a complete revolution in how the music industry understands power, betrayal, and the hidden forces that shaped rock history. And the earthquake Butler unleashed is spreading far beyond anything he originally intended, fundamentally changing the relationship between progressive rock and heavy metal forever. The immediate industry response to Butler's evidence dump has been unprecedented in its speed and brutality. Within 72 hours, Pink Floyd's corporate partnerships began collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. 3 major streaming platforms quietly removed Pink Floyd from their Artists of Integrity playlists. Classic rock radio stations started issuing disclaimers before playing Waters-era Floyd material, distancing themselves from the band's association with their former bassist. But the real revolution began when other heavy metal legends started coming forward with their own Roger Waters horror stories, revelations that Butler's courage had finally given them permission to share. The floodgates opened, and what emerged was evidence of a pattern of behavior so toxic, so systematically destructive, that it's forcing a complete reevaluation of Waters' entire career. Tony Iommi was the first to break his own decades of silence, revealing that Waters had approached him directly in 1976, just months after the Alliance collapse, claiming that Butler was mentally unstable and suggesting that Black Sabbath would be better off without him. Iommi now realizes that Waters was trying to destroy the friendship between Sabbath's founding members, probably to prevent them from ever attempting another alliance against record label control. Jimmy Page's revelation was even more devastating. Page disclosed that Waters had spent years spreading rumors about Led Zeppelin's supposed financial instability, telling other musicians that Zeppelin was on the verge of bankruptcy and couldn't be trusted as alliance partners. These rumors were completely false, but they were sophisticated enough to damage Zeppelin's credibility with other bands and prevent future collaboration attempts. The most shocking disclosure came from Deep Purple's surviving members, who revealed that Waters had actively sabotaged their attempts to renegotiate their recording contracts in the late 70s. Waters had convinced them that the market for heavy rock was collapsing and that they should accept whatever terms their label offered, while simultaneously advising their label executives about Deep Purple's financial pressures and negotiation deadlines. But Butler's revolution extends far beyond exposing Waters' individual betrayals. Industry insiders are now revealing that Waters' systematic undermining of the heavy metal scene was part of a much larger strategy to position Pink Floyd as the sole legitimate heir to rock music's artistic credibility. By destroying heavy metal's attempts at industry independence, Waters ensured that progressive rock would be seen as the only intellectually serious form of rock music. The evidence suggests that Waters deliberately created a false hierarchy in rock music, positioning progressive rock as sophisticated art while characterizing heavy metal as primitive noise. This wasn't just musical snobbery. It was strategic market manipulation designed to consolidate artistic credibility and commercial success within the progressive rock scene that Waters could control. Butler's evidence has revealed that Waters spent decades actively working to prevent heavy metal from gaining mainstream critical respect, not because he genuinely believed it was inferior music, but because he understood that metal's raw power and emotional honesty posed a threat to progressive rock's claims of artistic superiority. Waters needed heavy metal to remain marginalized to protect his own position as rock music's intellectual leader. The music journalism community is now scrambling to reevaluate decades of coverage that may have been influenced by Waters' manipulation. Major publications are discovering that some of their most respected critics had received guidance from Waters about how to position heavy metal in relation to progressive rock, guidance that shaped the entire critical narrative around both genres for decades. Rolling Stone magazine has quietly begun reviewing their archives, looking for evidence of Waters' influence on their coverage of heavy metal bands. Early reports suggest that Waters had significant behind-the-scenes influence on how major publications covered Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Deep Purple during their peak years, always positioning them as less artistically significant than Pink Floyd. But Butler's revolution has unleashed something even more powerful than historical revisionism. The surviving heavy metal legends are now coordinating their own response to decades of systematic undermining, and what they're planning makes Butler's attack on Waters look like a gentle warm-up exercise. Sources close to the situation report that Iommi, Page, Plant, and the surviving Deep Purple members are planning a joint statement that will expose the full extent of how Waters manipulated the rock music narrative for his own benefit. This isn't just about defending their own legacies. It's about reclaiming the historical recognition that Waters systematically denied them for decades. The most significant long-term consequence of Butler's revelation is how it's changing the power dynamics within classic rock's established hierarchy. For 50 years, Pink Floyd has been positioned as more artistically important than heavy metal pioneers. But Butler's evidence proves that this positioning was artificially created through systematic deception and betrayal rather than genuine artistic superiority. Major music festivals are already beginning to reorganize their historical presentations, giving heavy metal pioneers the recognition that Waters' manipulation had previously denied them. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is reportedly reviewing their historical exhibits to ensure they accurately represent heavy metal's contributions without the distortion of Waters' decades-long influence campaign. Butler's strategic timing has been absolutely perfect. He waited until Waters had already damaged his own reputation with the Ozzy attack, then struck when Waters was most vulnerable and least able to mount an effective defense. But more importantly, Butler waited until he had the perfect platform to ensure maximum impact for his revelations. The revolution Butler unleashed isn't just about Roger Waters anymore. It's about fundamentally rewriting the power structure of classic rock, giving heavy metal the historical recognition it deserves, and ensuring that no artist can ever again manipulate the industry narrative the way Waters did for decades. Butler has proven that patient, methodical revenge is infinitely more powerful than immediate emotional response. His 50-year wait for the perfect moment has resulted in the complete destruction of his enemy and the liberation of an entire musical genre from systematic oppression. The heavy metal revolution that Geezer Butler just unleashed will reshape how we understand rock history forever, and Roger Waters will be remembered not as a principled artist, but as the man whose betrayal united heavy metal against him and ultimately led to their long-overdue recognition as rock music's true pioneers. Subscribe immediately for exclusive updates on the Butler-Waters war that's rewriting rock history. Hit that notification bell because industry insiders promise even more devastating revelations about Waters' systematic betrayal of heavy metal. Comment below. Was Butler's 50-year wait for perfect revenge the ultimate power move, or should he have exposed Waters' treachery decades ago?